So you're saying with Hilton Honors, I can use points for a free night stay anywhere?
Anywhere.
What about fancy places like the Canopy in Paris?
Yeah, Hilton Honors, baby.
Or relaxing sanctuaries like the Conrad in Tulum?
Hilton Honors, baby.
Ooh, what about the 5-star Waldorf Astoria in the Maldives?
Are you gonna do this for all 7,000 hotels and resorts?
When you want points that can take you anywhere, it matters where you stay. Hilton for the stay.
Click the banner to join Hilton Honors for free today.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
For exclusive podcasts and more, sign up at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast where we look at true crime, pop culture, other podcasts, and this week we look back at our 2018 review of the original Dr. Death from Wondery. Joining me to get that done is my true crime co-author, co-podcaster, real-life husband, and all-around swell guy, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, why are we doing this?
Okay, well, first off, we're off this week.
That's true.
So we're, again, doing another classic rewind, and this week we're doing Dr. Death, because on our next episode, we're going to be looking at the Peacock TV dramatic adaptation of Dr. Death. So we thought it'd be a good time to look back at our original review, because we might be referring to some things about the podcast when we talk about the TV show.
TV show is very different than the podcast, right?
Yeah, let's save it, though, for next week.
Honestly, Kevin, I cannot wait to talk about the TV show. But I'm also looking forward to hearing back our review of the podcast, because I'm curious to know, what did I think? Did I like it?
I'm not going to say, but did it have a couple of things come out of this review? First of all, Rebecca, I think you, for the first time, identified what you called the Wondery sound.
I did I?
You did. There's a lot more rage walking,
all right.
And I think that there was some other things there that I guess we'd say is foreshadowing of future Crime Writers On shows.
Are you saying this episode is a progenitor of some of our new stuff that we do all the time?
I don't know what that means.
It means, like, it's the first time we did stuff and now we do it.
Then I guess that's what that means.
All right, should we take a listen?
How about we do that?
The podcast network that brought us Dirty John offers another story of a dubious physician and the lives he changed. Dr. Death recalls the case of surgeon Christopher Dunch, a doctor who performed a string of botched surgeries across Texas while the system was unable or unwilling to stop him.
Imagine you're struggling with back pain for months. No one can tell you what's wrong. Then you find a doctor.
And the words that he said that I wanted to hear was, "I can fix you." And, those are magic words. I was in pain, and somebody, a neurosurgeon, said, "I can fix you."
You trust he'll take care of your problem.
Nothing but good reports and a list of accolades that were 2 pages long.
When you talk to him, he's engaging, he seems very intelligent, he's witty, he's charming.
He'd always talk about, "I'm going to be a doctor."
But he has this dark side that he likes to keep separate and hidden from everybody else.
Reporter Laura Beale, an award-winning health and science journalist and vocal twin to Mary Steenburgen, promises a 6-part investigation not only into Dunch's actions, but also into a healthcare system that does more to protect doctors than it does to protect patients. Now, we will be talking about plot points from the first 3 episodes of Dr. Death, which, by the way, is the most popular podcast in America right now. If you would like to jump to our spoiler-free review, look at the show notes, go to the time code indicated, and you will just get our thumbs up and thumbs down review. All right. Wondery is promoting Dr. Death as the successor to Dirty John, running a preview in its feed, a similar art, similar sort of rock and roll sensibility in the theme song. Laura, do you think this show shares DNA with Dirty John?
I mean, there's certainly a lot of similarities in terms of, it's in a medical field. It's a guy that seems very promising to people at first blush, but yet he's leading a double life. He's not who he says he is. People are fooled, yada, yada, yada. But I don't think it's totally the same thing. I mean, I can see similarities, but I think in this case, I feel like the consequences are a lot more serious than just bilking this woman out of her money, which was, in Dirty John. And I feel like there's going to be, a story that has a lot of larger ramifications. So I think there are similarities. I can see, it is the same kind of story, but not totally.
I think that the podcast shares more in terms of DNA with Dirty John in the storytelling respect, more so than the content respect. Yeah. It's very linear. It's very much structured like a book. And Dirty John was the same way. You get a chapter by chapter, complete story, and then the backstory of a person told in a linear way. It's very much structured like a true crime book, right, Kevin?
It is, and I feel very much like you can sense the professional journalist doing a podcast as opposed to a podcaster doing an investigation.
Right.
It kind of feels like that. Very solid, the way that Dirty John was.
Yep. It's pulpy, though, in the same way that Dirty John was. It has a sort of pulpy, hooky kind of like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Toby, what do you think about, the style of podcast here? The Dr. Death, Dirty John sort of genre of podcasting. And do you see comparisons between the two listening to this?
Yeah, I do. There's a strange feel to it, kind of. And I don't know if it's the delivery that she has and then the guy who does the commercials has. It's hard to get past that. But beyond that, I mean, I think it's similar in that they found a story that's pretty compelling, and then they've obviously done the work needed to be able to tell it with enough detail and sort of vibrancy so that it makes for something you want to listen to, certainly.
We have to talk about the ads for a second. We just have to.
Okay.
The promo codes for everything on this show is death, or the URL is death. And so one of my favorites is ZipRecruiter.com/death. You have HelixMattress.com/death.
It's your deathbed.
I mean, you're not going to forget it, right?
No. I mean, it's not as snappy as crime.
No.
Promo code crime.
That's true. Remember when Crime Town came out and
we were so pissed.
But we still were able to get crime for a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. We staked a claim to crime.
That's right.
Kevin, I want to talk to you about the production because Wondery, obviously they have a range of podcasts that they do, but this is definitely like Dirty John, Wondery partnering with a journalism outlet or a journalist to do a show. And I think that Laura Beil, her writing and her delivery is earnest and pretty straight. Wondery does, I'm going to take the theme song out. They have these distinctive theme songs, which I really like, but their actual sort of mixing and Foley and, use of music is very on the nose with these stories. And it sort of lends itself to that. It almost has like an investigation discovery sort of feel sometimes when you're listening to it with it
should be tense. They play music that's tense. And,
yeah, but they play music that's she says something and it's cue the ominous music, and then the ominous music comes in.
For most of his career, Dr. Henderson has focused exclusively on the back. It wasn't unusual for him to get asked to help with a complicated spinal case. But this call was different.
But I had never been called in by the administration to take over the care of a patient.
Or there's a scene where she's talking about a surgery, and in the background, all of a sudden you hear the beep,
in fact, that she'd been taken into intensive care just as Dunch was scheduled to begin operating on Mary Eford.
Yeah. Okay, there's a couple of things that I don't think were necessary. There were sort of unnatural inserted sound effects, things like, right in the beginning, he's count back from 10. It's you hear it in the promo trailer. It was right up front. It's imagine you're, going into surgery or whatever. And I don't think it's necessary, especially with something that this strong. I would just say some of the sound design, I think, is
cheesy. That's how I would describe
it. Because I just feel like it's unnecessary.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it too. Because I think it's a very strong show. So I'm not
Just imagine going to a steakhouse, getting a very nice steak and a whole lot of parsley. placed on the plate. And you're like, I don't need all this.
Right, and it's not faker. I mean, they don't need it to enhance it because they have the story. And the places where they do some sort of like fakery stuff just to sort of enhance kind of what's going on, it's like, okay, so we're at his birthday party.
When was the first time you remember seeing Christopher Dunch use illegal drugs?
Was at his birthday party.
And immediately you hear the bass drop with the club sound effects. And it's like, no. I mean, I think there are ways to do that where you can do it with a light touch, but they do it with everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is illustrated. And I think that if one or two things were illustrated here and there, it would be fine.
Because you're trying to figure out a way. I mean, if you're the sound producer, you're like, well, we don't have a lot of natural sound of things. You didn't do the drive test.
Yeah.
We have a lot of interviews with people, and we want to make this sound interesting from an audio perspective. And so I think you can do music, but some of it, I don't know.
Some of it's too on the nose.
A little too on the nose.
I will say, to me, I have come to think of that as the Wondery sound, and maybe I'll get used to it. I mean, it could just be that. It's just style, because I come from the public radio stuff. That's what we listen to, and this is very different.
It's a lot of bass.
A lot of bass.
Yeah.
A lot of trip hop.
I have to say, me personally, I was so enraged by the story, I didn't even notice the sound.
Good.
Rage walking has returned to my life, and I was like, as I was walking around town, just like, oh my God, I think I gasped. I can't even believe what I'm hearing as I was walking around. So,
Laura, tell me what you think about the really gruesome descriptions of these botched surgeries. She gets into detail like how he was supposed to be screwing something into the spine, and instead he's just drilling screws into the muscles around. I mean, it's pretty intense, right?
Yeah, that's when my rage walking happened. I was listening to it, and it was so horrific, but I think that level of detail actually really worked in this situation because it really illustrated how incompetent and how badly botched these surgeries are. Because you hear about times when something happens in a surgery and it goes awry, but when you hear the level of detail and just the level of just gross neglect and incompetence that happened, it's horrific. Like there were times when I was listening to this, I would actually stop walking and just stand there and be like, oh my God, I like these poor people. And that guy, Jerry, that was friends with him. I mean, that was just absolutely, you really couldn't believe that somebody could do something that badly. So I think the level of detail, it was extremely graphic. And that was what stopped me a lot as I was listening to it. Cause I was like, oh God.
I do. Now, Toby, this podcast is also promising a larger story, and I think we're getting hints of it. Episodes 1, 2, and 3. First episode sort of details a couple of the botched procedures. Second episode goes into some history. We get the Jerry story, kind of a little bit of Dunch arriving in Texas backstory. Third episode, we start to get some of the maybe systemic issues here, and we are promised this is going to be a health care story in addition to just a criminal story. Do you have hope that this podcast is going to deliver on that, given what we've heard so far?
The fact that the reporter is a healthcare reporter, that's her background. She's not like on the crime beat or anything. My sense would be is that she has a health care issue that she wants to expose and has found sort of an exemplary case that makes that point. So that would be sort of my intuition about what her kind of goal is, and that it's hard to make a podcast that's going to be number one about flaws in the healthcare system.
Right.
What you do is you find an outrageous story that illustrates it, and so that would be just from what little I know of her background, that would be sort of my expectation as to what's going to happen at the end. Is that it's a little bit like what Madeline Barron has done somewhat, which is to illustrate larger problems through a single case that sort of demonstrates those issues.
What this reminded me of as I was listening to this is we had a very high profile case that happened at our local hospital with a guy who, he wasn't a doctor. He was like, what was he? Was he a med tech?
I think he was a surgery tech or nurse, and his name was David Kwiatkowski.
So we had a case in our local hospital, and this was somebody that was assisting with surgeries, cardiac surgeries, but he was actually diverting drugs. And what happened in that case, and it ended at our hospital because that's where it all came to light what had happened. But after this guy was arrested, it turned out that he had been going all around the country doing this, and he would get fired and he would move on to another hospital, and there was no like national database to track where somebody was going if they had any kind of misconduct. So that was on, a level of somebody who wasn't a doctor, but somebody who was clearly impacting patient outcome. In this case, I think where she's going with this, it seems you've got a doctor who is clearly really incompetent, doesn't give a shit about his patients, doesn't even care when he like paralyzes his best friend, and these hospitals are just passing him off, and they're not communicating with each other because they're like, it's not our problem anymore. We got rid of him. But, and I think that might, have to do with like, malpractice insurance and lawsuits and not wanting to be liable. But at the same time, where I hope she's going is that she's going to show that, these large corporate hospitals and these big healthcare centers are basically looking out more for themselves in certain cases than the patients. And had somebody spoken up about this guy and gone public, people may not have died.
Right. Now, I think we should clear up, like this guy Kwiatkowski, he wasn't just diverting drugs. He was using the needles, and then they were using the needles on the patients, and the patients were getting hepatitis and dying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he was responsible for a ton of deaths because of his drug issues, and the way he was doing it in particular was pretty bad. Kevin, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How much cocaine and vodka do you keep in your desk at work?
Just the desk or the filing cabinet too? Yeah, 0.
How much sex do you have with your girlfriend on the couch in your office? How many times have you worn the same clothes to work 3 days in a row while you're performing in a sterile operating theater?
Never, but I'd break it up over those 5 days. Yeah.
One of the most interesting things to me is actually what takes place in the third episode is we hear about, because I've been curious about this training situation, because we do hear, and I think that we're all familiar with the story of you go to work and there's somebody horrible there, and then you remember the amazing reference they got when you hired them, and you're like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And we have good friends who are doctors. One of our best friends is a surgeon, and we kind of know what he has to go through all the time just to be able to do his work. Like when he switched from one job to the other, like he had his affidavit signed, and I like had to notarize them for him and all that stuff. This guy went to medical school ostensibly. People are saying he had this great training, and it turns out like he performed like fewer surgeries than somebody would do like in a couple weeks in medical school.
Yeah. This is the part of the story I really would like to hear, is how he got moved along after having performed only, fewer than 100 surgeries?
Fewer than 100.
When, the other surgeon is like, he did like
2,500.
Yeah. So, I would wonder about that part. In a way, I can see he was bad at this hospital and ended up going to the second hospital without the second hospital really knowing what they were getting, and then going to the third, because that does happen in a lot of different professions. And sometimes they're moving them along because, just because of sort of general incompetence, and you're moving them along and you really can't give a bad reference.
Or personnel issues, like human resource stuff.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a bad act. Kind of, I think, I'm trying to think, like with the church.
Yeah.
When sometimes there's
prep schools.
Or preps, right. It's like, okay, we're moving them along. We have to get them away from here and just go someplace else. And we don't care whose story he winds up on. Yeah. This is what I'd like to see in the coming episodes, is to find out a little more about how he got in this position, as well as how come he kept being able to, perform these surgeries without all the other people jumping on his back.
It did happen one time. Someone says they tried to physically intervene when he's performing the surgery. I mean, can you imagine?
Oh, you're hopped up on cocaine. You're going to be punching all those people out,
I mean, it is.
You'd be like the sheriff from Stranger Things. Like
It is a curiosity, and as Laura, as you pointed out in your notes when you sent to me, this is a very Googleable case. Except that I think the information that we want is not actually available in the Google searches because there's this pending litigation situation. And I'm just curious about your guys' theories about what's going on with this guy. What is wrong with him? Is it just drug stuff? Is it mental illness stuff? I mean, I threw out there to Kevin tonight, maybe he has CTE. We heard he was a football player in high school because he seems to be having some sort of degenerative situation. Laura, what do you think?
I think he lacks the empathy gene completely. I think that's kind of an understatement. But I was listening to this when he ended up really botching the surgery on this guy who's basically his closest friend from high school. And they finally find this guy who's bitter and angry and ramming everybody with his motorized wheelchair. And it's just really sad. And they're like, did he ever apologize? Did he ever come see you? And he came and saw him once and didn't say anything about his condition. Nothing about how sorry he felt. I just felt like, is he some sort of a sociopath? I don't know. But he's clearly lacking the empathy gene. You know, when you compare that with those stories you heard about him playing football and how he really wasn't very good at football, but he just kept trying and trying and trying and he wouldn't give up. I mean, you know what? Not everybody should be a football player. Not everybody should be a surgeon. Just because you want to be a surgeon and you keep trying. In this case, I don't think this guy was cut out for this. It sounded like he was more of a research person. But that lack of empathy was very, very disturbing.
What do you think, Toby? You think there's something degenerative here? Do you think it's addiction? I mean, obviously we can't know. I'm asking you to just like hazard a guess of what you think is going on with this guy.
Like the thing I was thinking about was there is this sort of American ideal or myth or whatever that you can do anything you want if you want it enough and you try hard enough. Like that's like a thing. And so that seems to be the way this guy kind of went about his life, right?
Rudy.
Yeah. So I don't know if he's like, if I really want it, I really try, I can be a really good surgeon. You can try really hard, but if you don't have like the basic qualifications to be a surgeon, you shouldn't be trying and failing again and again at surgery. Is different than like being a walk-on for the Colorado State football team.
Yeah.
It seems like he's carrying on this sort of mode of the way he acts and tries to, reach his aspirations from the football field and wrestling and whatever. And he apparently sucked at all of them to the surgery. So
something tells me he'd be really bothered if he heard that you said he sucked at those things.
Well, everybody else says he sucks at them. I mean, I'm sure he'd come over to my house and be like, "Oh, I think I've got it down now."
So I don't exactly know, obviously whether this is all because he's doing drugs or because there's something else. But there's one story that is actually enlightening to me in the opposite way that it was presented. The story about him doing the football drill at practice. He didn't get it right and asked everybody, can we do it again? He doesn't get it right, and can we do it again? And, come back the next time, says, Coach, can we do that again? And it's portrayed as like he's persistent and he'll do it and he'll work till he gets it right. But to me, being there's no I in team, it's also a very selfish way of acting.
Yeah.
When you're trying to work cohesively as a team, it's very much about everybody stop, I need to do this.
Right.
Yeah, where he certainly had that sort of stick-to-itiveness and that he applied it and all these, and like say, well, maybe he's just still trying to get, the surgery right, and he's still in there, with a little screwdriver, trying to fix the thing. And so I think that he's just so self-absorbed.
Yeah.
And that seems to be like how I interpret his reaction to Jerry having been paralyzed and, these other things. It's about him.
Yeah. I mean, it's very telling that when he's challenged, or when he's, people are asking him his qualifications, he'll say, I challenge you to find anything bad about me on the internet. You won't find it. Like, that's actually a measure of quality or something. Like, you can't just you can't just get Google, you can't pay them to like lower your results, which, by the way, you can pay for that. You can pay to, sure.
Oh.
And, yeah, it's crazy. And I think that your take on the football thing was exactly my take, is you're wasting everybody's time. Like, nobody wants to do this with you. No one wants to make practice about you. Rudy didn't do that to his teammates at Notre Dame. He didn't make them go out with him in the rain and run those stupid drills or whatever it was
Rudy.
He did. All right, well, let's do that thing we do then and give our thumbs up or thumbs down review to the mega popular podcast, Dr. Death. Should our audience check it out or not? Laura Bricker, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yes. It's very, very disturbing, but I like it. I like the way she tells the story. I like the people that she has access to that she interviews. She's got doctors that used to work with him. She's got patients who had botched surgeries, people that had intimate relationships. So I say give it a listen, and it'll get your step count up because rage walking is making a comeback.
Toby Ball, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for what you've listened to so far on Dr. Death?
I give it a thumbs up. I think it's been good so far, and I'm optimistic about the second half of it.
I'm going to give it a thumbs up too. Despite my concerns about the fairly dramatic production style that this podcast company does, things being a little too on the nose, a little too illustrative at times. There is a story inside the story here. I don't know if Laura Beale plans to go there or not, but what I'm getting out of it is the unbelievably patriarchal world of men that these surgeons live in, and the testosterone-fueled competition and the one-upsmanship, and how the only women's voices we hear in the podcast are through recordings of depositions because, you know, the women weren't comfortable being interviewed. They're the side characters. They're the nurses. They're the girlfriends. And it's great that a woman reporter is the one telling the story and peeling back the layers on this crazy, competitive, hyper-masculine world of neurosurgery in Texas. So I'm really enjoying it. It's pulpy, it's fun, it's a little soapy, and it's really gross. And those are all really good. And I mean those all in really good ways. And the journalism is really, really solid. So thumbs up for me. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm also a thumbs up. I'm looking forward to the future episodes. I want to know a little more about what's been making this guy tick. I want to hear from the nurses because they always know what's happening.
Want the same expert advice you get from the pros in the store while shopping online at DiscountTire.com? Meet Treadwell, your personal online tire guide that matches you with the perfect tire for your vehicle. Get your best match in 1 minute or less with Treadwell by Discount Tire.
So you're saying with Hilton Honors, I can use points for a free night stay anywhere?
Anywhere.
What about fancy places like the Canopy in Paris?
Yeah, Hilton Honors, baby.
Or relaxing sanctuaries like the Conrad in Tulum?
Hilton Honors, baby.
Ooh, what about the 5-star Waldorf Astoria in the Maldives?
Are you going to do this for all 7,000 hotels and resorts?
When you want points that can take you anywhere, it matters where you stay. Hilton for the stay.
Click the banner to join Hilton Honors for free today.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounders.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
So, Kevin, that was fun, eh?
It was.
What are we talking about next week?
Well, we are going to be talking about the Peacock TV adaptation of Dr. Death,
With Pacey.
starring Alec Baldwin, Christian Slater, and
Pacey.
Joshua Jackson.
Pacey.
We're also going to be looking at the new podcast from C13 Originals. It's called No Place Like Home. It has to do with a heist of Dorothy's ruby slippers.
All right, well, I can't wait for that. So I guess we'll be back next week. For all of us here at Crime Writers On, thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Partners in Crime Media.
So you're saying with Hilton Honors, I can use points for a free night stay anywhere?
Anywhere.
What about fancy places like the Canopy in Paris?
Yeah, Hilton Honors, baby.
Or relaxing sanctuaries like the Conrad in Tulum?
Hilton Honors, baby.
Ooh, what about the 5-star Waldorf Astoria in the Maldives?
Are you going to do this for all 7,000 hotels and resorts?
When you want points that can take you anywhere, it matters where you stay. Hilton for the stay.
Click the banner to join Hilton Honors for free today.